Yo, what's going on, Black Baseball Mixtape family? Little boys here, and this is what we call a celebrity get. I'm so glad to have this individual on the show because I was reading up about the film Their Turn at Bat, the story of the National Girls Baseball League, and I was like, who is the visionary behind this one? Please welcome Matt Truth to the show. What's going on, sir?
Not much. Thank you for having me, Flippo. I really appreciate it. Look forward to this podcast. Like I was telling you before, I really like this podcast. Baseball and wrestling, that's just up my alley. So,
For real, WrestleMania season, high season, everything's too is happening. April's the best time of the year.
yep.
It's funny how you and I have a bit of a parallel thing because I am also a filmmaker as well. I went to film school because I wanted to be in post. I was an editing student, and I went
Mhm.
to Chapman University, and I realized it is a rough craft, man. So I gotta ask, just from professional to professional, what was the moment for you when you were like, oh wait, this is the path I want to walk down?
I'd say I saw a documentary film. It was called La Batalla de Chile, and it was just so profound. It was about um, the sort of crackdown on like the student protesters in Chile at the time of the rise of, I can't remember off the top of my head the dictator's name, but he started cracking down on a lot of the student protesters and sending them to like concentration camps basically, and it was unbelievable just watching this go down. And I was like, I originally wanted to do fictional films, but then once I saw that, and plus the past experience I've had in my life, I just decided, you know what, this is probably better for me because I like these real stories. They are more entertaining to me, and they pertain to a lot more of my experiences in life. So I thought, this is probably the best way for me to go forward in this industry.
Yeah. No, I respect that. And the fact that I came across your work in the most weirdest backwards of ways. I had Buki Gates from the Pacific Northwest on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about the life of Seattle baseball and their culture. And they were talking about the rise of the clubs like the Seattle Owls. And so
Mm.
one afternoon, I was on this really dark rabbit hole about the women contribution of baseball in our history, and I came across the National Girls Baseball League. And your social media is almost like a quick reference guide of to how amazing that was during that time period. I mean, I gotta ask, like, was that intentional? Was it kind of like a, oh wait, I gotta build a museum on social media for this? Like, what was that for you when you came across such a cool organization?
Well, when I first started this project, I was in love with baseball stories, especially the ones outside of Major League Baseball. So, like the insider baseball about, minor leagues or rebel leagues that try to challenge, Major League Baseball's supremacy over the sport. Um, and I think I was looking for something to do my first project on. And one of the articles I came upon was an article about the All American Girls Baseball League, which that movie, A League of Their Own, is based off of. And in
Yeah.
that tiny little paragraph about that league, it mentioned the National Girls Baseball League. So it piqued my interest, and I started looking into it, and I couldn't find anything online. There was maybe like a biography or two about maybe a player or an owner, but really nothing concrete about the history of the league. So I just started looking into it more and more, spent a lot of time at the library in Chicago looking at newspaper articles, and there was just so much coverage in these microfilm collections of these newspapers, but online you couldn't find any of this stuff. So I just continued to go to the library, and I ended up finding players. I ended up finding family members of players, and it just became something a lot bigger than just this National Girls Baseball League. Now it almost seems like it's becoming a thing about just women's softball in general.
Mm-hmm.
You see the rise of like the NCAA softball going on right now. And you can honestly say, though, that this isn't anything new because this happened back in the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1950s. The game just exploded
Yeah.
during that time, and especially during World War II when they started creating the pro leagues. So, I mean, this was a story that I think needed to be told. And, it kind of bothered me that the All American League kind of put in their lot with baseball, even though a lot of them were softball players and a lot of them played on some pretty fabulous softball teams back in the day. And the league actually began as a softball league. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that this league is tied to softball as much as it is to baseball.
Yeah. So walk me through like the planning of it all, right? Like you find the information. I bet you can go into one of what I call those research kind of zones where 2, 3, 6, 8 hours go by, and you're like, oh my gosh, I spent the entire day at the library. But like, did you have like the conspiracy theorist boards of taking players and teams and years and making sense of it? Was it somewhere like a process of like trying to see if it fit like a puzzle? Like it must seem like you were on this discovery tour.
It pretty much was the conspiracy board. I just remember going to the library, and at first I'd never been to a library, so it was a new experience for me doing research there. And I met a lady there, and she was so nice that she taught me everything I needed to know in order to look for what I needed.
Can I jump in here? Why
Yeah.
have you been to a library before? Was that you just didn't need
Well,
one?
I
Technology?
had been to like a library, but like never to like a microfilm collection type deal. So I
Okay.
never looked through like old newspapers and stuff like that. And I don't know if like I was rusty because it'd been a while since I think high school was the last time I had been through or been to a library. So when I went there, it was like, oh man, I'm starting from zero. And meeting this lady though, she was so helpful, and she's like, okay, this is what you need to do, this is where you should look, blah blah blah. Learned everything I could from her within like a couple days, and then next thing I know, I was finding stuff that I really needed. So names of players was one thing, team names, entire histories of teams. If you look at like some online databases, they have some great information about individual teams and players as well, like newspapers.com or any of the Chicago Tribune archives or the Chicago Sun-Times archives. I mean, they covered the sport really well. So I was able to get all of those together to kind of create this database of player names and coaches' names and owner names. And then
Yeah.
from there, I ended up seeking out a lot of these players. So going through the phone book, going through online databases, looking for names, locations, birth certificates, marriage certificates, just to see, how many of these players were still around and who was willing basically to talk to me after I found these players. So, I mean, it was pretty daunting. It was at least a couple of years of just doing that before I finally was able to start looking for players and coaches. So, um, I do recommend though, if anybody does uh, take like a similar path or they are doing research for something, I mean, man, that local library microfilm collection is amazing. Like
Yeah.
I was seeing newspaper clippings about like full page articles about the league and full page articles about players or the lives of players. It was pretty cool.
And the vibe when you call in 2025 and say, I heard you was a baseball team, were people like excited? Were they like, what do you mean? They thought you were a scammer? Like, well, how'd
Oh
that
well,
work?
at first there was a lot of like, oh, who is this again? But after I explained exactly who I was or what I was trying to do, a lot of the players were very adamant about, yes, we want to tell our story because they were they were completely shut out from all this celebration that the All American League was doing regarding their existence.
Hmm.
So they were having reunions, but the National League, even though a lot of the players played in both leagues, they were completely shut out. So it kind of started like some sort of animosity in a lot of the National League players. They felt like they were being kind of pushed to the side, even though I mean it's a shared history no matter who you look at it. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the players came from the same teams or they were teammates on other teams, and they went back and forth. So it was tough. And then I met a lot of family members as well who were kind of wondering, oh, okay, should we help this person out or
Yeah.
but I would convince them, I was pretty convincing in what I was trying to do. I explained to them, I'm not looking for money from any of you. I just want to see what you either have as far as information for me, or if you were willing to share or be recorded for the former players that I found, if you were being willing to be recorded for this documentary.
Yeah.
and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So it's been nothing but positive so far. I might have had a few doors slammed in my face, but after a while, they heard from other players that okay, what I'm doing is noble. So then they kind of reopened those doors. So
You know what? I bet Clark Kent got some doors slammed in his face too, doing his
yeah.
job. You know what I'm saying? So you talked about the rivalry, which is interesting between the All American Girls Baseball League and the National Girls Baseball League. On the Black Diamonds podcast on Sirius XM, there really was some stories about how some players weren't even selected, especially if they were black, to play for All American Girls Baseball League in some instances. The question is, because I have for you, is what was that rivalry like on the ground? Was it like psychological warfare? Because some players cross-pollinated. So was it like who paid the highest contracts? Was it like a prestige factor? Why were they so button heads so often?
I think it's because there was animosity when the All American League was formed. Because in '43, William Wrigley, who was the owner of the Chicago Cubs, he started this league without any input from any of the softball people who had been running the sport up until that point. And I mean, these softball teams were pretty successful in their cities. So when he decided to not include any of them, I mean, there was a lot of anger towards him because a lot of these owners felt like they were getting their territory taken away from them. And that's why the National Girls Baseball League ended up starting because, I mean, these owners in the city of Chicago did not want to deal with um, this outsider taking all of their good players and all of their good locations. So that's why they kind of closed ranks. They
Mhm.
ended up kind of keeping the All American League out of Chicago, which is funny because I mean the the whole All American League started in Chicago,
Yeah.
and if you notice that they don't have a team in Chicago until 1948, and even that there was some issue because the All American League went to Chicago and asked them, "Oh, can we put a team there?" And they reluctantly kind of said, "Yeah, that's fine." But then the All American League started like this four-team minor league in the city of Chicago called the Chicago Girls Baseball League. And that
Okay.
just angered everybody in the National League because they were taking away more stadiums, probably going to take more players. So that's what kind of started the talent rating back and forth. And the National League, I think, was paid a little bit better because there were no travel expenses. Because a lot of the teams played in the city of Chicago or in the suburbs, while the All American League, they played all over the Midwest, so they had to pay for travel expenses to go, from Kenosha to Rockford to Grand Rapids or Springfield. So the National League basically told their players, well, we'll pay you X amount of dollars more than you'll get in the All American League, but the only thing is you have to find your own way to the ballpark.
Yeah.
And it got so bad that they eventually had to come to an agreement where they would not raid each other because I think the salaries were getting out of hand basically.
Yeah.
Um, but throughout their history, I think the National League paid more, and at certain points though they did try to work together, especially to create like a winter league in Florida for each of the players in both leagues to be able to play during the winter months basically when they weren't getting paid basically. So a lot of them did not have jobs. So the opportunity to play winter ball in Florida was huge. And I think
Yeah.
it would have been better if they'd had gotten that worked out back in like 47 or 48. And then that way, maybe they would have opened up another market for their brand of softball slash baseball or this hybrid thing that they were trying to create.
What was the atmosphere like for National Girls games? I mean, City of Chicago is a sports town to this day. I mean, it feels like they would be outside in droves. But was that the vibe out there?
Yeah, they were pretty excited. They sold out a lot of games. They averaged, I think, 500,000 in the late 40s.
Oh
And it
wow.
was absolutely amazing because if you look at like footage, I think there's a newsreel clip I have on my website, but you can see the stands are full. And if you look at some photos even that I have on the website, I mean, the stands are completely full. So it was a huge cultural experience in Chicago. I mean, the softball in Chicago was always top notch, even when it was amateur. So when this pro league came about, I mean, they brought in players from all over the U.S. So there were ball players from Los Angeles, Cleveland, New York, Florida, and they were all good ball players. So it kind of leveled or added to the level of play for the National League. So it was exciting.
Yeah, and you're a Chicagoland native, give or take.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so what's been your perspective coming up, and when you were a kid, seeing where Chicago baseball was, seeing it how it was before that, and even seeing it now? Are we in the start of a new revolution? Are we still in the dip? Shout out to the White Sox. Like, what's going on?
Well, like back in the day, the baseball teams here weren't very good. So the Cubs, like in the White Sox in the 40s and 50s, were not good. So I mean, the National League was oftentimes outdrawing them. It wasn't until the 60s with the Go-Go White Sox, and then like the 80s when the Cubs and the White Sox started doing well. That's when kind of brought a lot of fans back to baseball in the city.
Yeah,
But I think once the Cubs and the White Sox won the World Series, kind of the bloom was off the rose, and they've, for the most part, well, the owners have a lot of to do with it as well, because the Ricketts family and Reinsdorf, I mean, I don't know what they're doing with the ball clubs today, but I mean, they're causing kind of a rift between the fans and their team, and it's kind of disappointing because you're not going. I don't know about the Cubs because I don't really follow the Cubs as much, but it doesn't seem like they're trying to put a winning team on in the field, or they're trying to compete at least. So, uh, especially with the White Sox, the same thing. And it's like, there's some people that I know that aren't willing to go to games anymore for that very reason, unless there's like an ownership change or something, especially here with the White Sox.
yeah. 2024, the White Sox were 30th in a major league attendance, and
Oh, yeah.
growing up, the White. Okay, so for those of you who listen to the show long term, you'll know I love my Mets to the day I die. But when I was a kid and the leagues were split, the White Sox were my AL team. I actually have a brick at I guess they call it just rate field now. It used to be
Yeah.
called guaranteed rate field. I have a brick right there, right on the because I love that team so much. I'm a Frank Thomas kid. What
Oh,
I like the yeah, he was the big hurt, right? Like, let's be
yeah,
real.
yeah, definitely.
How important it was for representation. So that goes right back to the National League. I mean, you had women going out there, and as some of the reels you had on your website say, like, go full bore, 100%. What was that like for the demographics in the stands? Did girls go out and watch play? Was it for everyone?
You know, if you look at like even modern day softball, it's funny because the fan base, there aren't too many women that go to the games. It's likely men that follow it more. So back then you would see that stands almost like three-fourths full of men, and then the rest were women either just going out to enjoy an evening with their boyfriend or their husband. And it really it was a really odd time because the games would be played at like 8 or 9 at night,
Oh,
and some of them were being broadcast locally. So I don't know if maybe women watched more at home than they would actually go out, but it was but yeah, I mean, a lot more men than women, and I believe a few players mentioned how it sometimes became more of a hostile environment for opposing players. Like there
yeah,
was one player in our league, her name was Freda Savona, and the fans used to get on her really badly to the point where they would bring her to tears, even though she was the best player in the league. So as far as like, there were fans, of course, but a lot of the women who probably would have attended were either out playing softball themselves on like a local amateur team or on the playground, because it was still pretty big in Chicago at the time, and they recruited players like 13, 14-year olds all the time to play in the National League and in the All-American League. So that could also be a reason why you never saw a lot of women in the stands as well.
sure. You mentioned some stars. Let's hear some. I know on the recent social media post, you gave a spotlight for Black History Month to Koki Coker and Betty Chapman. Are there any stars from that league that could be considered local heroes?
You could say Alice Kolsky. She is the first MVP the league ever crowned. So that was back in 1944. She played for the Bronx Candy Kids, and she was a catcher and a pitcher. Her family is wonderful. They've shared a lot of photos with me, and they have a lot of memorabilia from her time in the league as well. Her brother was Ed Kolsky, who was the owner of the Queens team, and she was pretty fabulous. She played almost the entire existence of the league, and she was probably one of the most popular players in the league. So she was from around, I believe she was from Elgin, I want to say. And then there was Annie Goldstein. She didn't play that long in the league, but she was probably one of the top players in the league, and she was one of the top amateur softball players even before that. And she was a Chicago Bluebird, so she played, I think, only a couple of years, but she was another good player. She was a pitcher. And then there was can't remember her name off the top of my head. She Elaine Ekholm. Elaine Ekholm. So her name was originally Elaine Groff, and then she ended up marrying one of the coaches, and then took his name, so she became Elaine Ekholm. But she was a local kid, played at high school. They used to have a track and field event called the baseball toss, where I basically was throw a baseball as far as you can, and she was multi-time champion in that in high school. And she ended up being one of the players that played in the league, I think, until 1950. So she started out early, and then that was the end of her playing days. But she was another good one. Um, and then as far as like other players, though, they had some of the best softball players at the time. So we recruited, or the National League recruited, a young lady by the name of Gwen Wong. She was a Chinese American 14-year-old softball pitcher in San Francisco, and she was pretty good. So the Parisi Bloomer Girls team ended up offering her a contract after one of the national tournaments, and she came over and pitched one season. Ended up winning the championship in '47 with them. There was Wilda Mae Turner. She was another California native from Alameda, California. She was the best pitcher in the entire league's existence, and she was inducted into the Kern County Hall of Fame in Bakersfield, California.
Yeah.
Had a .14 ERA average her entire career, so she was a pretty good ball player. And then, of course, there's Freda, who I mentioned before, who she was probably the greatest player of her generation, but you never hear anybody talk about her. But anytime she was on a softball team, they won championships. I mean, this goes back all the way to her amateur days. So she was on a team called the Jacks Maids. They won multiple titles because of her. She had a sister, Olympia, and she was also pretty good. So those two sisters, I mean, anytime they were on the diamond, they produced gold.
Yeah. Let me ask you on a personal level. When you go to games, how do you take in the game? Are you someone who scores games behind the home plate? Are you up in the rafters with the cheap hot dogs? Like, how does Adam take on a game today?
I love going mostly I go to White Sox games, so I go to the upper deck and I love watching the game from above. And I just sit there and just veggie out and enjoy the game. Barely ever talk. I just sit there and watch. Love the White Sox, even though they're terrible right now. But you know,
And
I can't blame the players, and I can't blame the team. I blame the owner. But
hey, when
I
you pick a
love it.
team,
And
you got to
then
ride with them.
yeah, yeah. So I enjoy games. I love the smell of. I love everything about it. The stadium. I love just being with a bunch of other people who are probably there for the exact same reasons. So yeah, I enjoy it.
You got a favorite player right now? Just general.
Well, I love Luis Robert. I think he needs uh, he he needs to step it up somehow though. We had a lot of promise for him when he was a prospect and his first few years in the league, but I think it's time. Like they say he's got potential to be a superstar. I think I need to see that now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Lewis Robert needs that other chance to show what he has in store for his team. But shifting gears, man. So before we went back to hitting the record button, you had told me that their turn at bat, the story of a National Girls Baseball League, is a work in progress. But hearing these stories now, I want to be able to support. So if someone's listening right now, how can they can contribute to get this movie over the line so they can see it?
Well, like I said before, funding is the biggest thing. But I'm very reluctant to do like a crowdfunding campaign just because I'm not exactly sure if I can weave in and out of that. I might need some help with that. So if anybody has any ideas about, how to navigate that type of thing, then I'd be open to that. Um, and also like this thing has taken a life of its own. So I thought I was just going to do the documentary about the NGBL, but I think I need to do something more for softball. And the end goal, I think, would probably be more or less a museum. So it would be kind of cool if there was somebody out there who knew how to do that as well. I have accumulated a lot of stuff outside of the National Girls Baseball League, so I think a museum would be kind of the next step for honoring players in the pro leagues, players in college, and even players who were amateurs back in the day who never received that recognition, because there were hundreds and hundreds of women's softball teams in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and a lot of them have been forgotten. So I think it would be great to give them a place where, they can be honored and worshiped, and let the players of today, see this history and see, maybe they could try to achieve some of the same things that these ladies achieved back in the day.
This right here is so inspiring to me, man, because this is a mystery that had so many different layers, could have been lost to time, and you're like piecing it back together. That can take you years, if not decades, to get it done. I'm surprised you didn't say, one day you were just frustrated, being like, I quit. You're still going, despite everything else, man. I give you all the props in the world for that.
Well, I have reached some of those points, but then again, though, I'll always bring myself back down to earth, and I tell myself, sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about them, and I do feel that they have been given the shaft.
Yeah.
I think the All American League should have embraced the softball side as well, and they should have included this league or any of the other leagues that I've found, because they were, teammates, they were friends, they were players that just never got their flowers, so to speak.
As we wind this down here today, I ask everyone on the show this question. So let me ask you: is baseball cool? Why or why not?
I think it is. I think baseball has a lot of potential to be even cooler. I don't know. Some of the unwritten rules. I think like I loved it when Tim Anderson flipped his bat.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of people will not agree with me, but when that happened and all these other players started following suit, I thought, finally a little emotion. Um, so I think it's cool, but I think it can be cooler. So just let them play like they say, and once that happens, I think maybe the game will go to another level, hopefully.
Oh man, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with you in the booth, man. But here's the fun part: if someone's listening right now, want to learn more about you, more about the film, more about the research you're working on, how they go about doing that to connect with you.
You can go to my website. That's a documentary film website for Their Turn at Bat. That's nationalgirlsbaseballleague.com. It's all one word.com. Or you can go to any of the social medias like the X or the Instagram, NGBL documentary, at NGBL documentary. Or you can follow my posts. It's at AAGCIII. I post a lot about women's softball history. So, if people are interested, I mean, visit my page, visit my social media, and just, give me a like or just say, hey, this is pretty cool. And I really appreciate, any interactions that anybody gives me. So,
Yeah, I gotta go back to Chicago, man. Get me one of those campfire milkshakes. I heard they
yeah,
killed them.
that's about the only thing going on right now. So,
Oh man, thanks so much. Appreciate you.
thank you, Flobo.